Hello, loves. Welcome back to Building and Breaking, a podcast where we talk about how brands are built, trust is broken, and what salon owners, hairstylists, and pro beauty brands can learn. I'm Nina Kovner. I'm your host. And today, we're talking about another one of my favorite brands. I know. There's a lot of brands that I love. And there, there, there's a purpose behind all of this. It's all intentional, it's all by design. And there are just so many lessons that we can learn from so many different brands. And again, you don't have to love these brands, but you certainly can take away the wisdom and the lessons. So today we're talking about In and Out. Yep, In and Out. Look, I'm a SoCal born and raised, and In and Out, was literally part of my childhood and yeah, lots of memories. And In and Out is way more than a burger place. It is a memory, and it's a brand we can all learn something from. In high school, after parties, yes, we had parties in high school. And just a little context, I did graduate in 1984. So we're talking about this is a long time ago. We headed straight to In and Out, the one right off the 5 freeway in San Juan Capistrano. And it was a place where we could gather and eat some burgers, some fries, share some vibes and comfort food after, the parties. And decades later, today, here we are in 2025. I don't eat burgers, but I do still study and admire the brand because In and Out didn't just build trust through hype or continually reinventing themselves like Starbucks keeps doing, um, or being all things to all people. They built their brand through consistency. And 77 years later, they continue to grow and create happy customers. So, this is really a story about clarity, focus, long term loyalty, and value. And what happens when you, and I know this is going to ruffle some feathers, stay in your lane. I'll share some context about that in a minute. Stay in your lane and build with intention. So, we talk a lot about brand story on this podcast. And a big part of the brand story framework, and just as a reminder, brand purpose, what problems are you solving? Brand promise, how do you solve those problems? Brand people, who are you solving problems for? And brand products and services, what solutions do you provide to help solve the problems of your people? So In and Out is just, I know I use the word masterclass a lot in this podcast, but they really are in brand promise because the brand promise is the experience, it's the how. And In and Out's kind of like OG tagline was quality you can taste. And they built systems around that promise. That wasn't just the tagline, right? That was actually a promise. They didn't talk about the experience, they deliver it. They consistently deliver it. Consistency builds trust. Every touch point reflects care, intention, and consistency. Literally, every location, every drive through experience, every long fucking line waiting, um, every double double, every animal style fries, that blah, blah, blah. The promise is so deeply embedded in their operations, in their hiring, in their training, in their experience design. So they don't they're not big advertisers. They don't speak big mission statements. They don't do anything. They just deliver. They just deliver. And so that clarity of brand story, particularly the brand promise and how you design those experiences, you're not just saying like we're a luxury salon or we're an inclusive salon or we believe in healthy hair and scalps. You need to build systems that deliver on that promise. Operation systems, education systems, marketing systems, communication systems. And so, really, when we think about, I talk about it all the time, the experience is the brand. And it is all strategic and it's all by design. And it all begins with clarity of brand story. The real headline for this episode, however, is the power of a focused menu. Oh, I have so much to say. In and Out doesn't have chicken sandwiches. They don't have breakfast burritos. They don't have seasonal this and this and this and this. It's just burgers, fries, shakes, and soda. That menu is like an MBA in clarity, in focus, in understanding what their brand people value. And it's not just the menu, because when you think about each product, each service requires inventory, it requires training, it requires so many things to deliver on just a single service or product. So, In and Out knows this. It simplifies their training, it increases their speed and accuracy, it reduces operational costs and waste, and it protects the customer experience. When we go back to the brand story framework, brand products and services, what solutions do you create and deliver that help solve the problems of your people? So when I say stay in your lane, I don't mean like you can't do anything else. That's not what that means. And we're not doing absolute black and white thinking in this podcast, right? We're seeking context and nuance. What I am talking about is that, and I've been talking about this for years, in how complicated salon menus have become and how many products brands continue to create. It creates distraction. It bloats the system. It weighs the system down, the entire supply chain, all the way through, all the way through. So when we think about that, that creates confusion, particularly in salon menus where most of them are in the language of hairdresser versus the language of consumer. I do a lot of work with our clients on simplifying their menus to be aligned with their brand and focused on who they serve, AKA the client. And it weighs the entire system down. So when you have a more aligned offering, service, or product, you have simpler marketing, you have simpler education, you have stronger execution, clearer communication. Again, it goes all the way down the line. And if you look at your sales, speaking generally, however, if you look at your sales, one thing I'm pretty sure of is that it's likely that 20% of your services are delivering around 80% of your revenue. It's the 80-20 rule. And the same goes for beauty brands. 20% of your products and or SKUs are delivering 80% of your revenue. Now, again, I'm not speaking to you, the listener, individually, because I don't know your brand. I haven't looked at your P&L, right? I don't have that opportunity. Now, for our clients, of course I do, but I don't know you individually, the listener. So I'm pretty passionate about this because I have experience. I have a lot of experience with this. One of the stories that I'll never forget. There are a lot of stories, a lot of experiences, a lot of lessons that I learned in my executive career. But I'll never forget, I'll never forget the time that I came to the owner of the company I was working for, who's fucking amazing. And I said, it's time to discontinue some things. And you would have thought that I said, like, I want to do something terrible. Like, it was like are you fucking kidding me? And I'm like, look, I get it. Like, it's a very successful company. And some of these products and SKUs I was recommending discontinuing generated a fuck ton of money. However, when you look at the big picture, what that was doing is it was clogging our entire supply chain, right? And it was weighing us down. And there were so many new products I wanted to launch that were more relevant and valuable to the market. And I did not want to continue to just add without remove. But, it's always a risk, but it was a highly educated strategic risk. And I'm happy to say it paid off. And after that initial conversation, I continued to do that through my entire career. Um, so it all applies. One of the brands that I studied a lot, and a brand I am going to feature on this podcast because I've been studying them for decades, is Southwest Airlines. And one of the greatest lessons I learned from Southwest Airlines very early in my career, which aligned so much with the philosophy of the company that I worked for and the genius behind the philosophy of the owner of the company I used to work for, is that Southwest's brand promise was about connecting people, right? You're free to move about the country. And, air travel wasn't always accessible to people with less income, right? And so at the time, this was a very innovative move, right? To say, like, you know what, air travel does not need to be expensive. We're going to create a company and a brand that allows people to connect and create experiences with the people that they love, right? And through air travel. And one of the ways that Southwest did this, and they were profitable, I think, gosh, I didn't look this up, so don't quote me on this, but it was just recently in the last 10 years ish that they started to struggle. They had more consistent profitable quarters than I think any other airline in history. Again, don't quote me on that, but it's close to it. And one of the reasons this was not because they had high airfares, because they did not, but they chose to only have one type of aircraft. This is the lesson. And if you're a client of mine, you've heard this story so many times. They only chose to have one aircraft where most other airlines had multiple aircrafts, right? So they would have like 777s and 747s and five, whatever the fuck, different aircrafts. But Southwest chose to have only one type. And what that did is that created massive efficiencies all the way through their business, right? They only had to inventory one type of airline parts. They only had to train on one type of airline maintenance. They only had all the way down the line. It created such incredible efficiency. So they weren't wasting money on multiple aircrafts, multiple inventories, multiple trainings. They were able to stay focused and pass that savings along to the customer. Now, of course, in 2025, Southwest Airlines, have they have, speaking of air travel, talk about a bumpy ride. And again, they're on the list to feature in the podcast. Okay, so simplify. And that doesn't mean you can't offer valuable stuff. Yes, offer valuable stuff. You just don't need 80 million different things. It confuses the customer. And we are all customers, right? We're all clients. We're all customers. And ask yourself, really ask yourself, would you rather be given 50 options or 4? Think about it. And this is really something we also talked about in the Starbucks episode. Okay, in and out. Consistency builds trust. I'm just going to repeat that. Consistency builds trust. Consistency builds trust. And it's hard to be consistent in this day and age. There's a lot of distraction. There's a lot of shit happening in the world. However, consistency builds trust. And that kind of goes back to that less is more, right? You want to be able to execute consistently. So if you have too many things, too many offerings, too many services, too many products, too many SKUs, it becomes more difficult to be consistent, right? So at In-N-Out, we don't have to wonder what we're getting at In-N-Out. We already know. And that's what builds long-term trust. It's not chasing trends. It's not being all things to all people. We're looking at consistency, building trust, and building high lifetime client and customer value, meaning the amount of happiness, joy, referrals, and revenue Those clients or customers bring you over the lifetime of your relationship. It's your foundation. It's how we build trust. It's how we gain more referrals. It's how we retain. Consistency builds trust. Another thing I love about In-N-Out is they know who they serve. They understand their brand people very well. And again, they don't try to be everything to everyone. They know who they are. They know what they offer. They know who it's for. They resist the pressure. They stay focused on what their people value, and they deliver on what their people value. It's the fundamentals. It's the fundamentals. Executing consistently, right? Executing consistently aligned with your brand. Another thing I love about, another big lesson I love about In-N-Out is as we see like other restaurant chains grow too fast, right? They just open too many locations. It's a tale as old as time. Not for every brand, but it happens often. Over expansion. And then it's like, oh shit. Okay, let's start closing. You think about the stress that puts on the system all the way through the system. And In-N-Out could have scaled fast. They certainly have the money. They're privately held, but they didn't. They have expanded incredibly slow, which has allowed them to retain that consistency and that quality and that culture. So again, more isn't more. And that also could include actual locations or just fast growth in general without the systems to back it up. Because when we sacrifice quality or trust, we've kind of sacrificed everything. I have been asked many times over the decades, like, what is one piece of advice you would give to any business, but in particular salons who want to open a second location? And I mean, this is the lesson, right? And remember, systems fail more often than people fail. Systems fail more often than people fail. And typically, it's a lack of systems, a lack of preparedness, a lack of leadership at the original location. It spreads resources thin. It's not impossible. It is possible. It's happened. There are absolutely successful salon brands that have opened multiple locations, but it is difficult. Possible? Yes. Difficult? Yes. But it really comes down to the same lessons that we can learn from In-N-Out. Another super relevant lesson that I love about In-N-Out is they're not the cheapest burger, but they've always had fair aligned with their brand pricing because pricing is a function of marketing. It's not a feeling, it's not a vibe, it's not an out of context advice on the internet. Pricing is a function of marketing, it's a function of market position, luxury brands, moderate brand, value brand, discount brand. Pricing is a function of marketing. In-N-Out isn't the cheapest, but they are fair. They don't price gouge. They never have. Consistency builds trust. They don't exploit demand just because there's 500 cars in line, like spilling onto the streets. They don't look at that and be like, oh shit, let's double the price of our burger. Because that's not how pricing strategy works. I have just seen so much out of context, well meaning, but incorrect pricing advice in our industry. And I understand why. Most people don't have the education, the fundamental education when it comes to pricing strategy. It's not a salon thing, it's a business thing. And I recently saw someone post the only thing you have to understand about pricing is demand. And that's not true. Pricing is a function of marketing, pricing is a function of market position. Does demand come into play? Yeah, absolutely. But that's not the driver. If it was, In-N-Out burgers would be $50. And to contrast that, McDonald's fucked up. I mentioned McDonald's in another episode. Oh yeah, the Starbucks episode. I think we were talking about dress code. Anyways, if you pay attention, I pay attention. I study brands. That's what I do all day, every day, to better help our clients, and community. McDonald's price gouged. They took advantage of the inflation narrative, and it bit them in the ass. It hurt them. It made headlines. How much it hurt them. Because different brands have different price points, different value that we place on them. Whereas, honestly, we probably would pay $10 for an In-N-Out burger. We're certainly not fucking paying $10 for a Big Mac. Different brands, different experiences, different brand promises, different. So what did McDonald's do? They started cutting back pricing, but they didn't have to do that. They could have just stayed strategic, right? They could have stayed strategic, but they chose not to. And every time you kind of do shit like that, you put some cracks in in trust, right? Whereas In-N-Out, they're not erratic, and they certainly aren't price gouging. They certainly don't exploit. They're consistent. Consistency builds trust. So In-N-Out's pricing reflects their brand promise, their market position, quality, value, integrity. So, yeah, I could do a whole. Anyways, okay. So many lessons from In-N-Out. Okay. The other lesson, and this is all connected. Again, this is all connected to focus and staying aligned with your brand. So, a focus menu, simple systems, it makes everything simpler. It makes everything simpler. We think about Southwest, right? Business is hard as it is. We don't need to make it more difficult, not more difficult for our clients, our customers, our teams. If you're a lease based salon, your tenants, simple is more. Simple is better. It's always better. And it's more difficult to simplify systems because inherently, we as human beings, for whatever reason, we like just think more, right? Oh, if we let's add this. Oh, so and so said, oh, so and so's doing this. That's why your brand story is your North Star. It's your compass. It's your GPS. It is the foundation for which you make every decision. So all of this creates higher lifetime customer value and client value. We know what to expect. And most clients and consumers don't need gimmicks for that. They need consistency. Consistency. Consistency builds trust. And In-N-Out doesn't do that by more. They do it through clarity. And that clarity allows them to build systems that deliver time after time after time. And remember, consistency isn't boring. Look, they have a secret menu. Everybody knows about it. Well, most In-N-Out people know about it. If not, you can see it on TikTok, right? You can see it on TikTok. In-N-Out knows who they are. They have consistently delivered on that promise. And they've earned that loyalty, that fandom, that high lifetime customer value. One visit, one experience, one order at a time. So, I mean, consistency is the real flex, right? And building trust is how you build something that lasts. Remember that. Thank you so much for listening. If you are enjoying these episodes, I would be so grateful if you shared them with your business besties. And also, if you're listening on a podcast platform, if you would drop a rating or review, because what that does is that helps this podcast become more discoverable to those that can find value. And I truly believe that the more we focus on the brand fundamentals, the more we can minimize the systemic dysfunction that has existed in the professional beauty industry for the 4 decades I've been in it. I truly believe that. I do. I really believe that. And I am so grateful for you and for your feedback. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. And I know I mentioned this on a few of the earlier episodes. If you have a brand you want me to do a deep dive into on this podcast, please reach out and let me know. You can find me on the socials at Passion Squared. Um, Email awesome@passionsquared.net or Nina@passionsquared.net. Let me know. Let me know. I can't promise that I will, but I certainly want to hear from you and what is important to you, what you'd like to learn, what you'd like to take away from this podcast, what you value from this podcast. I appreciate you. And as I close this episode, since I am talking about being an LA native and born and raised and growing up on In-N-Out Burger, I just want to say LA, stand strong. Yeah. And I love you. All right, love. Thank you for listening. Have a peaceful day. Bye.